She thought her past was buried forever until a general spotted her hidden tattoo and saluted her like a legend. It was a hot, dry morning in a small desert town in New Mexico. The sun was already high in the sky and the air felt heavy with heat, the kind of heat that made everything move slowly. Dust blew lightly across the ground, covering everything, with a thin layer of brown. In the middle of this quiet place, there was a little auto shop near the edge of the highway. It looked old, with faded paint and a rusted sign that read Maya's Garage. But inside that garage, something special happened every day. A woman named Maya Torres worked there alone. People in town didn't know much about her, but they knew one thing. If your truck was broken, Maya could fix it. Maya was in her early 30s. She didn't smile much, didn't talk much, and always wore the same dusty overalls with long sleeves. Her black hair was tied back tight, and her hands were always stained with grease. She didn't mind the dirt. She didn't mind the silence either. She liked being alone, working with her tools, solving problems that made engines come alive. Again, the townspeople respected her skills, but they often wondered about her. She never talked about her family, never went to town events, and she always wore those long sleeves, even in the heat. Some people thought she might have burned scars. Others said maybe tattoos, but no one had ever seen anything that morning. Maya woke up before the sun. She made her coffee black and strong and walked outside to start her day. She had a job to do, pick up some scrap metal from an old farm 15 miles away. She got into her old red pickup truck, which was nearly as beat up as the cars she fixed, but she loved it. It was loud, strong, and it had never failed her till that day. Halfway through the trip, as she drove along a quiet military highway, the truck began to make a strange noise, a deep knocking sound. Maya frowned. She knew that sound too well. The engine was overheating and something was off with the radiator. She pulled over to the side of the road, killed the engine, and let the silence settle around her. There were no cars in sight. Just a long road stretching in both directions, with mountains far in the distance. She got out of the truck, popped the hood, and looked inside. Steam hissed softly. She didn't panic. She didn't even sigh. Just grabbed her toolbox from the back, rolled up her sleeves a little, just enough to work, and began to take the engine apart piece by piece. Her fingers moved quickly, confidently. This wasn't the first time her truck had stopped like this, but this time she would. Need to patch something fast? She knelt down, her knees in the dirt, sweat dripping from her forehead. Still, she stayed focused. As she worked, military trucks started to pass by. A convoy of green vehicles. Some Humvees, a few armored transport trucks, and one large command vehicle with antennas. None of them stopped. Maya barely looked up. She wasn't interested in attention, and the soldiers clearly weren't interested in her. She was just a woman fixing her truck in the middle of nowhere. No one cared. At least that's what she thought. But inside one of the trucks, someone had noticed her. A man in a high-ranking uniform, General Whitaker, sat by the window. He looked out and saw the woman working alone, her face serious, her hands moving like she'd done this 100 times before. There was something about her, something that didn't fit. She didn't look surprised or stressed. She looked like she belonged there, like she had done this on a battlefield, not just a roadside. Maya, however, didn't know she had caught anyone's eye. She had removed a cracked hose, cleaned the filter, and patched a leak with a temporary seal. She worked fast, wiping sweat from her brow with her sleeve. Her left sleeve moved slightly up her arm when she lifted the toolbox again, but not high enough for anyone to see what was under it. Just a glimpse of faded skin. She kept the sleeves rolled just below the elbow. She always did. She stood up, stretched her back, and walked to the side of the truck. She poured water into the radiator and waited. The truck coughed once, then started. A soft smile touched her lips for a second, but it disappeared quickly. She closed the hood and leaned on the side of the truck to rest for a moment. In that short pause, she looked up at the sky. The sun was blazing now, but she didn't mind it. She had worked in worse conditions before, places with more danger. more fire, and more noise. But she didn't think about those days anymore. She had left that part of her life behind a long time ago. Back then, she had been someone else, not just Maya the mechanic. She had a name, a title, something that only a few people had ever known. But that time was buried deep. That tattoo, on her back hidden under her clothes, was the only thing that still connected her to it. It was a symbol of a secret mission, a lost team, and a part of herself she had locked away. People didn't ask questions, and she didn't offer answers. That was how she liked it. Fix the trucks, earn some money, keep her head down. That was the plan. Simple and quiet, but plans don't always work the way we expect. As Maya wiped her hands on a rag and prepared to drive away, the military convoy slowed down. One of the Humvees had pulled over not far ahead. Something was wrong with their sensor system. She saw the soldiers gathering around it, looking confused. She looked at her own tools. She knew she could fix that vehicle in minutes. She hesitated. Should she help? Old instincts stirred inside her, ones she had pushed down for years without thinking too hard. She grabbed her wrench and started walking toward the soldiers. Noticed her, surprised to see a woman with dirt-covered overalls and confidence in her steps. One of them said something, trying to wave her off, but she didn't stop. "Pop the hood," she said calmly. They looked at each other, unsure. "Can fix it faster than your techs." They hesitated but obeyed. She peered in, checked a few wires, pulled out a loose connector, cleaned it, and reattached it. The system beeped back to life. The soldier's eyes widened. "How did you?" She shrugged. "It's just wires." Then she turned and walked back to her own truck. From the window of the command vehicle, General Whitaker watched her closely. He had seen something in her walk, her posture, and the way she held the wrench like a weapon. And then, for a split second, as she lifted her arm to toss the wrench back into her truck, her sleeve slid up again. And this time, he saw at just the edge of a black tattoo. A pattern he had only seen once before, long ago, on someone who was said to be a ghost. He leaned forward in his seat, a memory rising from the past. Could it really be her, Maya, unaware? Of his stare, sat back in her truck, started the engine, and drove away. Dust lifted behind her as the truck rolled off toward the mountains. She didn't look back, but someone was about to come looking for her. The sun was burning hotter now, and the quiet desert road stretched far into the horizon, empty and still. Maya's truck rolled slowly along the side of the military highway. She had managed to get it working again after the radiator leak, but she knew it was only a temporary fix. The patch she had used wouldn't hold for long. She needed to get back to her garage before the problem became worse. Her hands were still stained with grease, and her overalls stuck to her skin with sweat. But she didn't complain. She was used to discomfort. Hard work was her peace. She drove with the window rolled down, letting the hot wind blow across her face. The desert had a strange kind of silence. It wasn't empty, but it made everything feel small, like you were the only person left in the world. Maya liked that feeling. She didn't mind being alone. Alone meant no questions, no past, no expectations. Just her, the sound of the engine, and the road ahead. But not far behind her, things were starting to change. The military convoy that had passed her earlier had slowed down. One of the Humvees had triggered an alert on its system. A sensor had gone off, something related to navigation or internal wiring. The soldiers pulled over to check it. They didn't. Seemed worried at first, just annoyed. But as they opened the hood and looked inside, it became clear that it wasn't an easy fix. General Whitaker was riding in the lead vehicle of the convoy. He was a tall man in his 60s, sharp eyes, gray, hair neatly trimmed, and a presence that made everyone stand straighter when he entered a room. He had been in the military for over 40 years, and he had seen more battles than most could imagine. He had also seen things that weren't written in history books, things that only a handful of people knew about. And one of those things had a tattoo, just like the one he thought he saw on the woman fixing her truck. He had barely caught the glimpse, but it was enough. A black ink pattern, partially hidden under the rolled sleeve. It stirred something deep in his memory. He kept thinking about it as he watched his soldiers try to fix the Humvee. None of them could figure it out. The sensor system wouldn't reset, and the computer was stuck. The heat was rising fast, and frustration was building. Just then, he noticed movement in the distance. Maya had pulled over again, not far from the convoy. Her truck had finally given out. The engine was steaming once more. She cursed under her breath, opened the hood, and looked at the broken patch she had made earlier. It had melted in the heat. She didn't panic. She pulled out her tools and got to work again. But she noticed something else this time. The soldiers, still gathered around their broken Humvee. Now looking at her, she could feel their eyes on her, unsure, half curious, half doubtful. She ignored them at first. She wasn't interested in getting involved. Her plan was simple: fix the truck, drive home, disappear into the noise of the garage again. But something inside her, something old and buried, was starting to stir. It wasn't pride. It wasn't ego. It was something deeper. A sense of duty, maybe, or instinct. She watched them struggle for a few minutes longer. They were trained, smart, but not experienced with field repairs. At least not the kind she had done. She remembered days long ago when she had done things like that under fire and darkness, with only seconds to think, compared to those days. This was nothing. Without another thought, she grabbed a smaller toolkit, shut the hood of her truck, and started walking toward the convoy. The soldiers looked up, surprised. One of them raised a hand. "Ma'am, this is a military operation. You can't be here." Maya didn't stop walking. "Looks like your sensor system's shorted. Probably a loose wire or bad connection." They looked confused. One of them laughed, nervously. "We have it under control, thanks." Maya stopped in front of the Humvee, her face calm and serious. "If you had it under control, you wouldn't be standing in the heat scratching your heads." The soldier frowned but didn't argue. Something about her tone made him step aside. She leaned over the engine, looked around for a moment, then pulled out a small flashlight and began checking connections. Within seconds, she found the problem. A corroded connector that had come loose and was causing the system to misread its signals. She pulled out a small brush, cleaned the contacts, reattached the wire, and closed the hood. "Try it now," she said. One of the soldiers climbed in, started the engine, and looked at the screen. The warning light was gone. "It's working," he said. Sounding shocked, Maya simply nodded and turned to leave. General Whitaker had watched the entire thing from the side. He hadn't spoken a word. But his eyes hadn't left her for a second. When she turned to walk back to her truck, he stepped forward. "You seem to know a lot about military systems," he said. She paused, turned her head slightly, but didn't answer. "Most civilians wouldn't know how to diagnose that kind of error," he continued. She shrugged. "It's just wires." He took a step closer. "Where'd you learn to do that?" She looked him in the eye. "Places I don't talk about anymore." There was a long pause. The general's expression didn't change, but something in his voice softened. "I saw your tattoo." Her body stiffened. "I didn't mean to, it just caught my eye." She turned fully to face him now. Her eyes, once calm and quiet, were suddenly sharp. "Then forget you saw it," she said. The soldiers nearby fell silent. They didn't understand what was going on, but they could feel the tension. Whitaker studied her closely. Had seen that tattoo once before, over a decade ago. It was the mark of a classified unit, one that officially didn't exist. A team so deep in black ops that even most generals had only heard whispers. And one member of that team had vanished after a mission that went wrong. They called her Ghost Widow. "I thought you were dead," Whitaker said quietly. Maya didn't answer. She just stared at him. "Or retired," he added. "Either way, you're not just a mechanic." She said nothing, but the silence spoke louder than words. "I won't ask any more questions," he said finally. "Thank you for helping my men." She nodded once, slowly. Then she turned, walked back to her truck, and sat in the driver's seat. She didn't start the engine yet. Her hands were shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from something deeper. Being seen. Being recognized. After all these years of hiding, she stared out the windshield, the desert wind blowing dust across the road in soft waves. Her past had always been a shadow behind her, but now it had caught up. The general watched her go, said nothing more to his men, just returned to his vehicle, deep in thought. And as the convoy started to move again, Maya sat quietly in her truck, staring at the road ahead, knowing nothing would ever be the same again. The sun hung heavy in the sky as Maya sat in her truck, gripping the steering wheel but not starting the engine. Her chest rose and fell slowly, each breath controlled, like she was trying to calm something boiling inside her. She could still feel the weight of General Whitaker's eyes watching her as he spoke. The moment he said, "I saw your tattoo," something in her shifted. For years she had made sure no one saw it. That ink wasn't just a picture, it was a mark. It's a symbol of something that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Her mind was no longer in the desert. It had drifted back to another time, another place. 12 years ago in a freezing mountain pass, smoke in the air, blood on the snow. Back then, she wasn't Maya Torres the mechanic. She was known by another name, whispered only by those who feared her or owed her their life. Ghost Widow. What the few surviving members of that final mission had called her. Not because she was cruel or cold, but because she moved like smoke, silent, precise, and gone before anyone could blink. No photos of her existed in any official files. No name was written down in public records. That her team was erased from history after their final mission collapsed, but the tattoo remained. It was small, inked in black, and shaped like a winged blade crossed by lightning. It was designed by her team, a symbol of the covert unit they were part of, Shadow Unit 9. Only 5 people ever wore it. 3 had died, 1 disappeared, and Maya, she walked away, or at least tried to. She had built this new life slowly and carefully, like repairing a broken engine. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt, a small garage, old tools, a truck she could count on, a name that didn't carry weight. She learned to keep her head down, to stay quiet, and to never let her past bleed into her present. But now it had. The memory of the general's words echoed in her ears. "I thought you were dead." She almost wished he had kept thinking that. It was easier to be dead in the records than alive in someone's memory. She took a deep breath and looked in the rearview mirror. The convoy was moving again. The Humvees drove past her truck, their tires kicking up dust. Some of the soldiers glanced at her as they passed. They didn't know. They couldn't know. To them, she was just the strange woman who fixed their vehicle faster than any of their techs could. But General Whitaker knew, at least part of the truth. And now, the moment that would change everything was about to happen. As Maya reached across her seat to grab her water bottle, her left sleeve caught on the edge of the toolbox and slid higher up her arm. She was tired, thirsty, and distracted. She twisted the cap off, took a long drink, turned slightly in her seat. That was when the general stepped out of his vehicle again. He had been watching her from behind tinted glass. Unsure of what he should do, part of him knew he should respect her silence and let her be. But another part, an older, more instinctive part, told him this wasn't just coincidence. He needed to be sure, and then he saw it. The tattoo. Fully exposed now, just above her elbow, sharp and faded, but clearly there. His heart skipped a beat. He had seen that tattoo before. Only once. It was on a man who had died during that final operation, and in his last moments, he whispered a name. Ghost Widow. Everyone thought she had gone down with the others, but now, here she was. The general approached her truck, walking slowly with respect. His boots crunched against the gravel. Maya didn't hear him at first. But when she felt a presence near her window, she turned. Her eyes locked with his, and the world seemed to pause for a second. Neither of them spoke. He glanced at her arm again. She followed his eyes, looked down, and realized what had happened. The sleeve was up. The tattoo was visible. She didn't move to hide it. She didn't need to anymore. The general took a breath, and then did something no one expected. He saluted, not out of habit, not out of military formality, but out of deep, genuine respect. The soldiers still nearby froze. They looked at each other confused. Why was a general saluting a mechanic? Maya didn't return the salute. She didn't even nod. She just sat there. Her face unreadable, her eyes calm but alert. The general dropped his hand slowly. "Your ghost widow," he said softly, like saying the name might make it vanish. She didn't deny it. She just stared at him. After a moment she whispered, "That name doesn't belong to me anymore." He nodded, but it did once. She looked down at her hands. The same hands that had once held weapons, saved lives, and ended others.
Ow.
They held wrenches and spark plugs. They were rough, but steady. "You were the reason my brother came home," the general added, surprising her. She looked at him again, this time with a hint of emotion. "He was one of the men your team saved. During Operation Glacier Shield, he told me what happened. Said a woman appeared out of nowhere, fought like 10 soldiers, and disappeared before sunrise." Maya didn't smile. She didn't speak. She just listened. "After that mission, they said the whole team died," he continued. "I believed it. Everyone did. But seeing you here, it's like seeing a ghost." She finally replied, her voice low and steady. "That's what they always called me." He nodded again. "You deserve more than a dusty garage." Shook her head no. "I deserve peace." The soldiers were still frozen, watching the scene unfold, but not understanding its full meaning. They couldn't know the weight behind this quiet moment. They couldn't know the blood, the history, sacrifice that hung between these two people. The general took one more look at her tattoo, and stepped back. "I won't report this," he said. "Your secret is safe. I never asked for." "Silence," she said. "But you earned it," he replied. Maya slowly rolled her sleeve down, covering the tattoo again. The general turned to leave, then paused. "If you ever want to come back, the door is open." She didn't answer. He understood. He walked away. As the last of the convoy moved on, Maya sat there in her truck alone again. But it didn't feel the same anymore. The desert felt different, like it was holding its breath. The dust that once protected her, the silence that once comforted her, they no longer hid her past. The truth was out, be not to the world but to someone who mattered. She looked at her hands once more. They were still steady, still useful. She started the engine. It sputtered, then roared to life. The old truck still had power left. Did she, as she drove off down the empty road. The wind swept across the sand, erasing the tire tracks behind her. But for the first time in many years, she wasn't just driving away, she was driving forward. The heat was rising slowly as Maya drove away from the convoy, but she no longer noticed the temperature. Her thoughts were loud in her head, louder than the engine, louder than the desert wind. For years she had trained herself not to react, not to feel too deeply. But what had just happened? General Whitaker standing before her. Saluting her like a warrior, it broke through the thick wall she had built around her old life. She kept her hands steady on the wheel, her eyes on the road, but inside her heart was not calm. That salute had done something to her. It had stirred memories she had buried so deeply they barely felt real anymore. Not just the missions, not just the danger, but the faces, the voices of her teammates. The bonds that were built in silence, in survival, in sacrifice. She hadn't expected to be recognized. A tattoo, hidden for so long, was not meant to be seen. She had kept it as a reminder of who she once was, and what it had cost her. It was a piece of her old identity, but now that piece was exposed. Everything was changing because of it. As she reached a small gas station outside town, she stopped to cool down the truck again. The engine was struggling in the heat. She pulled up near the edge, away from the pumps, and stepped out. She opened the hood, steam rising once more. Her arms moved with practiced ease as she poured water into the radiator. But her mind was far away. Suddenly, she heard tires on gravel. A military jeep pulled into the station. Maya glanced up. It wasn't the general. It was a young soldier, probably. No older than 25. He stepped out quickly, walked toward her, and stopped a few feet away. His expression was nervous, unsure. "You're Maya, right?" he asked carefully. She didn't answer. She kept working. I'm sorry to bother you. The general asked me to give you this. He held out a small envelope. She glanced at it, then looked him in the eyes. He wasn't threatening, just a kid following orders. She wiped her hands, walked over, and took the envelope without a word. The soldier hesitated. He said, "To thank you for what you did back then. It's for what you did today." Maya didn't respond. She gave a single nod. The young man gave a small, awkward salute, then turned and walked back to his jeep. She watched him drive away. Then she looked at the envelope. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she slid it into her back pocket and returned to her truck. She finished the repairs, closed the hood, and sat inside for a moment before driving home. Later that night, in the quiet of her small garage, she sat at her workbench with only a single light glowing above her. The envelope lay in front of her. Now, she stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. Inside was a folded piece of paper, simple handwritten. It read, "I never forgot what you did. I still remember the day you carried 3 men across the ridge under fire. I remember the sound of your voice when you gave orders, even when no one else could stand. I remember that you stayed behind when we evacuated just to give us a chance. You disappeared that night and everyone thought you were gone. We're wrong. You were still fighting in your own way. I'm sorry it took me this long to say thank you. You deserve to be seen." There was no signature, just the letter. Maya stared at the words. Her hand trembled slightly. She folded the letter carefully and placed it inside a locked drawer at the bottom of her desk. Then she sat back, letting the silence settle around her. The next morning, something strange happened. She walked out to open the garage as usual, coffee in hand, wearing her dusty overalls. Parked in front of her gate was a military truck. Not the big kind, just a small one. Next to it stood 2 soldiers off duty. Weren't armed? One held a car battery. The other held a coffee thermos. They looked unsure when she stepped out. "Morning," one of them said. "We heard you're the best mechanic around." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Mind taking a look at our ride?" he asked. She glanced at their truck, popped the hood. They smiled and followed her instructions. She didn't ask why they were really there, and they didn't ask anything about her past. That same day, 2 more soldiers showed up, one with a flat tire, the other with a busted taillight. By the end of the week, Maya had worked on 8 different military vehicles, and not one of the soldiers mentioned her tattoo, or the general, or the past. They came respectfully, quietly. They brought her coffee, sometimes sandwiches. A few even left small patches with their unit logos as thank you tokens. One afternoon, after fixing a Jeep with a jammed steering rack, a soldier named Grant lingered by the workbench. He looked around the garage, then at her. "People talk," he said. She kept working, not looking at him. "But we're not here because of that," he continued. "We're here because we trust you. There's no one better." She finally looked up. "Is that all?" He gave a crooked smile. "And you fixed the lieutenant's truck faster than our own base mechanic." Couldn't help a small smile, too. The first one in days. After he left, she found something new on the porch. Small military medal, wrapped in cloth. No note. No explanation. Just left quietly. The next day, a few more gifts appeared. A patch. A coin. A dog. Tagged with the words "Honor" before "Glory" engraved. She didn't return any of them. She placed each one inside an old metal box under her bed. She had spent years trying to hide from the world. Now, slowly, the world was coming to her, not with noise or questions, but with quiet gratitude. And she accepted it, not with pride, but with peace. One evening, as the sun was setting and casting golden light over the desert, Maya sat outside her garage, watching the sky. The wind was soft, and the air felt different, lighter somehow. A bird flew low over the sand, its wings slicing the air. She touched the spot on her arm where the tattoo was. Once it had marked her as a weapon. Ghost, a myth now. It was still the same ink, but it meant something new. It was a symbol of strength that didn't need to hide anymore. She didn't plan to go back to the military. She didn't want a medal ceremony. She didn't need her name in a file or a speech in her honor. But she understood something now. She didn't have to run from her past. Because even in silence, even in shadows, the truth finds its way back. And sometimes it shows up not with sirens, but with a salute. And for Maya, that was enough. The desert wind moved softly that morning, blowing thin lines of sand across the road like whispers. Maya stood at the edge of her garage holding a cup of hot coffee in one hand, a wrench in the other. She looked the same as always, dusty overalls, rolled up sleeves, grease on her hands. But something in her had changed. She could feel it in the way people looked at her now. The way silence followed her, not out of mystery, out of respect. Since that day with General Whitaker, things were no longer the same. He had seen her tattoo, recognized her from a past she had kept hidden for over a decade, and saluted her not because of rank or rules, but because of who she truly was. That one moment had opened a door that could never be closed again, but it hadn't brought trouble. It had brought something unexpected on her. It started small. Soldiers came quietly, asking for help with their trucks, bikes, radios, and equipment. They never asked questions about her past. They didn't push. They brought their broken things and left behind small thank yous, a coin, a patch, a medal. Maya never asked for them, never displayed them. She kept them in an old box under her workbench, not as trophies, but as reminders. Reminders that even if the world had forgotten her name, the people who mattered still remembered what she had done. One morning, Maya was under a Humvee, tightening a bolt when she heard footsteps. Not one pair, several. She slid out from under. The vehicle wiped her hands and stood up. A group of soldiers was gathered at the entrance of the garage, all off duty, all silent. First, Maya raised an eyebrow. She had never seen this many show up at once. Then one of them stepped forward and said, "We came to help." She looked at them with quiet confusion. "Help with what?" "With whatever you're working on," he said. "You've done enough for us. Let us carry some of the weight." Maya blinked slowly, surprised. She wasn't used to kindness like this. She usually worked alone. That was her way. Quiet, independent, unseen, but something inside her softened. She nodded once, and just like that, these soldiers, men and women, who had never fought beside her but somehow understood, rolled up their sleeves and got to work beside her. As the weeks passed, the garage became more than a repair shop. It became a quiet gathering place, a place where people who carried heavy stories came to rest. Some came just to sit. Others brought broken machines. Some brought nothing at all, only their time. Maya didn't speak much. She didn't tell stories or explain the meaning behind her tattoo. She didn't need to. Her silence said everything. The way she moved, the way she fixed things, the way her eyes stayed calm even when engines roared and metal snapped, people could feel it. She was different. She had seen more than anyone could guess. One afternoon, Maya found something placed gently at the edge of her porch. A wooden box, hand-carved, with a folded paper sitting on top. She picked it up carefully and opened the note. It read, "For the one who fought and never asked for thanks. For the one who disappeared but was never forgotten, we remember, we honor." Inside the box were 5 medals, each from a different unit. Units that had once been saved because of her. Units that had heard whispers of the woman who gave everything and asked for nothing. She stood there holding the box for a long time, sun setting behind her, casting long shadows across the dirt. She didn't cry. She rarely did. But her hands gripped the box just a little tighter. That night, she sat at her workbench, took the medals from the box, and one by one placed them beside the old items she had been collecting. The coins, the patches, the tags, each one a quiet voice saying, "You matter." Later, there was a knock on the garage door. It was quiet, almost unsure. She opened it to find a young woman standing there in civilian clothes. She looked nervous, holding a photo in her hands. "Are you Maya Torres?" she asked softly. Maya nodded. The girl stepped forward and handed her the photo. It was of a man in uniform. Strong eyes, calm smile. "He was my brother," she said. "He died in the mission you were in. He always talked about someone he called the Ghost Widow. Said you saved his life more than once. Said he owed you everything.
Maya.
Looked down at the photo, her heart tightening. I just wanted to meet you, the girl said. To say thank you. Maya didn't speak. She just nodded, and after a moment, reached into the drawer and pulled out a small coin, one of her most treasured ones, and placed it in the girl's hand. This was his, Maya said quietly. He left it behind. It belongs to you now. Girl's eyes welled with tears. She clutched the coin and whispered, Thank you. As she walked away, Maya stood in the doorway, the night air cool against her skin. The next day, something unusual happened. A black government SUV pulled into the lot. A man in a formal uniform stepped out. Not military, not police. Quiet, serious. He introduced himself as someone from the Pentagon. He'd been sent by the general. We have authorization, he said, to present you with an official honor. Posthumous service medal, correction of records. You will be restored in military history. Maya looked at him with calm eyes. No ceremony, she said firmly. He nodded. Understood. We don't speak of the past, she added. Then, we'll speak of the present, he said. You've given more than your share. She said nothing, but he reached into his case and handed her a sealed envelope and a metal case. Inside was a medal, rare and high in honor. Maya accepted it without ceremony. No cameras, no applause. It's the quiet click of the case closing. The man left without asking questions, and then one day, the general returned. He didn't bring soldiers, just himself. He parked far from the garage and walked the long road toward her. Maya saw him coming and met him halfway. They stood silently for a few seconds. I had to come, said she nodded. He looked at her with tired but grateful eyes. You changed things, reminded us what honor really looks like. Just fixing engines, she replied. You're doing more than that, he said. You're repairing something we lost, the spirit. He paused. Then he reached into his coat and handed her one last item, a metal plaque. It read, To Maya Torres, the ghost who brought us back. She stared at it for a long time. Then, without a word, she walked to the garage wall and nailed it above. The door from that day on, soldiers, travelers, and even civilians came to the garage, not just for repairs, but for strength. To see the woman who had been part of something no one dared speak of, to shake hands with someone who reminded them of quiet courage, Maya never wore a uniform again. She never stood on a stage or gave interviews. She didn't want fame. Didn't want her past turned into a headline, but she became a legend anyway, not because of what she said, but because of what she did. Every bolt she tightened, every engine she fixed, every quiet moment of listening to someone who had seen to. Much that was her way of serving now. Her tattoo stayed hidden most of the time. But on special days, when the right people gathered, she would roll up her sleeve just enough for it to be seen. Not to show off, but to say silently, I'm still here, I remember. In return, those who came offered their own signs. Of respect. A patch. A salute. A story. The garage in the desert became something more than a place to fix machines. It became a home for people who carried invisible scars. And in the middle of it all stood Maya Torres, mechanic, ghost, hero.